In 2025, the United States under the Trump administration imposed heavy tariffs on goods imported from China. These tariffs were a significant escalation of the trade tensions that had been brewing between the two economic superpowers for years. The tariffs covered a wide range of products from electronics to machinery and were designed to protect American industries and jobs. Some tariffs were set as high as 245%, reflecting the increasingly acrimonious trade relationship between the two nations. The U.S. government argued that these tariffs were necessary to address unfair trade practices by China, such as intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. However, the move was met with strong criticism from many within the U.S., who argued that tariffs would harm American consumers and businesses. The tariffs also raised concerns about a potential trade war between the U.S. and China, which could have devastating consequences for the global economy. The immediate impact of the tariffs was felt most acutely by businesses and consumers in both countries. American companies that relied on Chinese imports saw their costs rise sharply, while Chinese companies faced higher barriers to entry in the U.S. market. The tariffs also contributed to rising prices for consumers in both countries, as businesses passed on their increased costs. China wasted no time in responding to the American tariffs. Beijing viewed the tariffs as an attack on its economic interests and a challenge to its growing global influence. In a carefully calibrated response, China imposed retaliatory tariffs on a range of U.S. goods, including agricultural products, automobiles, and chemicals. These tariffs were strategically designed to target key sectors of the U.S. economy and to exert maximum political pressure on the Trump administration. China's tariffs, like those imposed by the U.S., were designed to protect its domestic industries and to send a clear message that it would not be bullied by the Trump administration. The Chinese government also sought to rally domestic support for its position, portraying the trade dispute as a struggle between a rising China and a declining U.S. The message resonated with many in China, who felt that their country was finally standing up to the U.S. after years of perceived economic exploitation. In addition to tariffs, China also took other measures to retaliate against the U.S. For example, it limited the release of Hollywood films in China, a move that was widely seen as a symbolic blow against American cultural influence. The Chinese government also made it clear that it would prioritize business deals with countries that were not engaged in a trade war with China, putting American companies at a disadvantage. The escalating trade war between the U.S. and China sent shockwaves through the global economy. Countries around the world watched nervously as the two economic giants squared off, fearing the consequences of a full-blown trade war. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, warned that the tariffs could lead to slower global growth and higher inflation. The World Trade Organization, or WTO, also expressed concern, cautioning that the tariffs could undermine the rules-based trading system that had underpinned global prosperity for decades. The trade war also had significant geopolitical implications. The U.S. and China were not just economic rivals, they were also strategic competitors with increasingly divergent interests. The trade war exacerbated these tensions, making it more difficult for the two countries to cooperate on other pressing global challenges, such as climate change and nuclear proliferation. The trade war also created opportunities for other countries, such as Russia and the European Union, to increase their influence on the world stage. The trade war highlighted the growing importance of emerging markets in the global economy. As the U.S. and China turned inward, countries like India, Brazil, and Indonesia saw an opportunity to expand their own economic influence. These countries were eager to attract foreign investment and to forge new trade relationships that would reduce their dependence on the U.S. and China. Despite the uncertainty and disruption caused by the trade war, businesses and consumers in both the U.S. and China began to adapt to the new reality. American companies sought to diversify their supply chains, reducing their reliance on Chinese imports. They also lobbied the U.S. government for exemptions from the tariffs, arguing that the tariffs were harming their businesses and costing American jobs. Chinese companies, meanwhile, looked for ways to reduce their dependence on the U.S. market. They stepped up their efforts to expand into other markets, particularly in Asia and Africa. They also invested heavily in research and development, hoping to move up the value chain and become less reliant on American technology. The trade war forced policymakers in both countries to rethink their economic strategies. The U.S. government, under pressure from businesses and consumers, began to explore ways to de-escalate the trade tensions with China. The Chinese government, meanwhile, continued to emphasize the importance of self-reliance and technological innovation. The trade war served as a wake-up call for both countries, highlighting the need for greater economic diversification and resilience.